Hey there guys, I'm back to another video. Today I want to go and talk about Nintendo and their platforms that they have out at the moment, the 3DS and the Switch. And my main topic that I want to go and bring up is, should the 3DS stay around? Because since the Switch was showcased and now that it is out, it is a hybrid of a home console, but it could also be taken on the go at the same time. So should the Switch just take up that little spot that the 3DS is currently taking? You know, because the Switch is just a lot more powerful. The Switch, it looks like it's going to have a great lineup of games and a great future in and of itself. So should the 3DS even stay around? Because the 3DS has also been around for a while now, and I think it has had its spotlight and it's time to shine. And for the most part, I think the 3DS was mainly used as a fallback for the Wii U. And, you know, I think the 3DS was out after the Wii came out or something like that, like towards the end of the Wii's life cycle. So the 3DS has been around for a very, very long time, and at this point, I think it should not be around for much longer. But in a recent IGN article, Reggie said that they are going to support the 3DS beyond 2018. So what are some of the positives of keeping it around, and what are some of the positives of also not keeping it around? And these are just some of the points that I found within my own, I guess, thinking and my own thoughts. So let's go and talk about the side that I think a lot more people are on, and it is the fact that the 3DS should not stay around. I have heard so many YouTubers and some of my friends even say that the 3DS should not even, you know, be around because we have the Switch now, and the Switch pretty much fills that little gap that the 3DS is currently taking in. So, or that little hole, I should say, or that little space, whatever. So, the Switch could pretty much be the replacement of what the 3DS is right now. And one positive of not keeping the 3DS around is that more games will be on the Switch now. Franchises will now move over onto a much better platform, arguably, because of the better specs that the Switch has over the 3DS. So, for example, a big franchise that has recently made the Switch over is Pokemon. You know, Pokemon recently announced during the E3 Nintendo Spotlight thing that they are making a mainstream Pokemon game, a full-on RPG for the Switch. And that's great and all, because the Pokemon series, all of the RPGs have never been on a home console. You know, when you look back at it, you know, all of the mainstream Pokemon games have always been on a Game Boy or a DS or 3DS, you know. They've never been on a home console. So the fact that they are doing this move, you know, making the Switch over, it kind of makes sense for hopefully more IPs and franchises to do the same, you know, make that switch over onto the Nintendo Switch itself. So, and because we are now on the Switch, like I said earlier, it's going to have more games, and the games are going to look a lot better. They're going to perform a lot better, hopefully, and, you know, just more games. So, and then obviously from a business point of view, is the next point that I have is Nintendo wants to encourage people to buy a Nintendo Switch, obviously, as they are making more of them at the moment. They want to encourage people to buy them, and having these more games will just do that even more. You know, like, what's the point of buying a video game console when there's no games for it? So by moving all of these franchises and games over, you'll just entice more and more consumers out there to purchase a Switch themselves. And hopefully by the end of 2018, most of the 3DS owners will have a Nintendo Switch at that point, which I will predict, honestly, maybe 50% of 3DS owners will own a Switch at that point. So, and what are some of the positives of keeping it around? You know, I've always had this thought when the Switch was first announced. I was like, maybe the 3DS should stay around because the 3DS is doing good right now, you know. But now that the Switch is out and the Switch is doing fairly well on its own, you know, I feel like that the 3DS has ran its cycle and it should not be around for much longer. But hey, here are some points that I found out through my own thinking of the positives of keeping the 3DS around. So, first up, games could still use that dual screen functionality of the 3DS, you know, like with the Wii U and the DS, you know, there were two screens to work with, but now with the Switch, there's only one screen to work with. So certain games will not be able to work on like they did on the DS/3DS. So now, obviously, most of the games, I think, towards the end of the of the 3DS's life cycle is not really using that bottom screen too much. I mean, like, there's only a few select games that really use it really well, I think. So it is a bit tricky to go and pick and choose which games will use that dual functionality of the DS still. But I think that most games will find a way around it. Either just make the game, just instead of 2 screens, just 1 screen, or just not even, I guess, port the game over or something like that. There's always a workaround because the DS and 3DS are very different, I guess, handhelds, because, there is that dual screen functionality, and it worked pretty well for Nintendo when it did come out. So there's definitely a workaround with not working with dual screens, and most games up to this point have been working with 1 screen. So my next point is sort of like a little, I guess, dumb point. I said earlier that from a business point of view, Nintendo wants to have people still buy Switches, but at the same time, they probably still want people to buy 3DSs, because there are still 3DS systems in stores. We have the new 2DS XL coming out very soon, so they probably want people to buy that. That's probably going to be their last iteration of the DS family, I think, unless they make a whole new one or something like that. So they probably still want some people to buy a 3DS if they're into that, like if they don't want a full-blown home console, and for a much cheaper price as well, because the DS is much cheaper, or 3DS I should say. The 3DS consoles are just a lot cheaper than the Switch console itself. So, and my last point for keeping the 3DS around is that Nintendo could still utilize this dual platform setting that they've been using for the past couple of years or so. They've been doing this since the original Game Boy came out. When the Game Boy came out, they had the NES, and then they kept moving on. When they had the N64, they had the Game Boy Color. When they had the GameCube, they had the Game Boy Advance, and then when they had the Wii, the DS, Wii U, 3DS. So and now with the Switch coming out, I feel like that they should just not have a handheld, because the Switch in and of itself is a handheld to begin with. So the 3DS is probably going to have a very short cycle very soon. But, if they do want to go and continue, which they are, beyond 2018 and stuff like that, they could still utilize this dual platform of the 3DS and Switch. And just my own thoughts here on why they are pushing the 3DS beyond 2018. My reasoning behind it, I think, is that they probably still have games lined up for the system itself, and they probably just want, to have a nicer library of games. Like the 3DS itself already has a pretty good chunk of games on it already, so like just like keeping it around and just adding more games to it will not hurt it whatsoever. So yeah, those are my thoughts about the 3DS, whether or not it should stay around. And yeah, so what are some other points that you guys could come up with on both sides of the argument, whether it should stay around or it shouldn't? So be sure to leave them in the comment section below. I will be sure to read them. And yeah, I think that is about it. If you guys haven't already, you can subscribe. I put new videos up every single Saturday. Next week, I will hopefully have a review of Firewatch, which is one of my summer backlog challenge games. So hopefully I will have that review out by that time. And then if you guys want to find my social media, Facebook and Twitter, you can do that as well. I put updates to my future videos on there occasionally. And yeah, I think that is about it. Thank you guys for watching this video again. Now, see you guys next time with more videos. Game on, gamers.